This happened when I was maybe 6 or 7. I'm 23 now. My dad had brought it up over drinks at our annual 4th of July party, as he does every year. And I've been deciding whether or not I should share it. And I finally decided it's time to let go of my shame. And hopefully, you can all at the very least get a nice, sharp exhale out of your noses by the end of this. The house I grew up in had 2 bathrooms, one upstairs, one downstairs. I never used the upstairs bathroom because we had a furry toilet seat cover and it reminded me of the Cookie Monster, which scared the shit out of me. It was basically an unwritten law that my parents used the upstairs bathroom and I used the downstairs. Unfortunately for me, I never actually wrote the law down. Anyway, one day I had stomach flu and I really had to go. The problem was that Saturday morning cartoons were on, and I was desperately waiting for a commercial break so that I could relieve myself, because I dared not miss a second of Pinky and the Brain. When the glorious commercial break finally arrived, I was basically a pretzel on the floor, contorting into various different shapes and forms, doing my very best not to shit myself in the middle of the living room floor. I raced to the bathroom, with my hands covering my ass, only to discover that the door was shut and locked. Shit! I screamed and pounded and pleaded for whoever was in there, my father, to let me in. Finally, just as I thought I was passing the point of no return, the lock on the door clicked open, and I immediately raced inside, nearly knocking over my father in the process. He shut the door without question, and I waddled over to the toilet as quickly as my clenched butthole would allow, expecting sweet relief. I got what I asked for, except I didn't make it onto the toilet. I got as far as bending over and putting my tidy widers down to my ankles before my sphincter muscles failed me and diarrhea trickled down my legs onto my nice white underwear. I've never been able to rationalize what happened next, and I don't know if it was out of fear, disgust, or disbelief. But as fast as I could, I hobbled out of my soiled underpants, and with a swift kick, I punted them up and over our bathroom sink, behind the nearly opaque yellow light that covered the house in 3 100-watt light bulbs. I took a quick shower and immediately went back to watch Pinky and the Brain, as if nothing had happened. Are all kids this dumb, or is it just me? I don't know. I've been asking myself that same question for the past 15 years. The next day, I woke up to the sound of the smoke alarms and my mother screaming for my dad to get the fire extinguisher. Luckily, he was able to get the fire under control before the entire bathroom had caught a blaze. But during the chaos, my mother had called 911, and the fire department was on its way. What happened next was the most shameful moment of my entire life. I was standing in the doorway between my mother and father, while a fireman on a stool pulled out a pair of shit-covered, burnt underwear from behind our light fixture. The smell was unbearable and lasted for nearly a week. A few panels of drywall and our sink, mirror, light fixture, carpeting and shower curtain had to be replaced. And now, you know my shame.
This actually happened to me today, and it was the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Today, I had a doctor's appointment. The receptionist for his office is one of the hottest girls I have ever seen. Due to a medical issue I've been having, and because of my family history, my doctor requested a stool sample. I had to give it right away because he needed a fresh one. It took me a while to go, and I was trying to rush because my car is in the shop and I had a bus to catch and didn't want to stand around and wait another half an hour for another bus. I finally got the sample taken care of, and I was rushing back to the lab to drop it off because the bus was due to come any minute. The jar was wrapped in a plastic bag, and I was rushing down the hallway, and I turned the corner and literally bumped into the hot receptionist. What happened next was my worst nightmare. I guess in my rush, I didn't completely screw on the jar completely tight. The lid came flying off, and some of my sample ended up all over her, on her clothes, on her face, even in her hair. I couldn't even react to how embarrassed I was. She looked horrified, like she wanted to puke, and I was so horrified I didn't even help her up. I just grabbed the jar and ran to the lab, dropped it off, and I tail-ended it out of that building. I want to die now, and I'm never going back to that doctor's, or even leaving my house ever again.
About 4 years ago, I was out of work for a year. I went to 6 interviews or so over the time for big firms, banks and the like, in fancy high-rise offices in the heart of London. I'd been thinking about it and had decided in advance of the first interview that when people would ask me, "What's your greatest weakness?" or "What would you most like to improve about yourself?" I'd tell them I was a bit scatty, sort of gently absent-minded. I hope you're not familiar with the word. It's not really that big of a flaw, as it normally refers to small-scale stuff like losing your pen lids. I could say it with a smile. A pretty good answer all round. But in the first interview, surrounded by all this mahogany and glass, I decided on impulse to be a bit posh and use the full word rather than the shortened scatty. So when the kindly, white-haired executive asked me, "What's your greatest weakness then?" I confidently leaned back, smeared an abashed little smile over my face, and said, "I'm really scatological." He looked at me for a moment and went, "Oh, really?" "Yeah," I said, "Oh," grinning, in what I thought was a charmingly self-efficating way. I try not to be, but I really can't help myself. He didn't know what to say to that. Neither did the 5 who came after him. And every single time, I smugly congratulated myself on such a brilliantly disarming answer. Eventually, it came out in conversation with a horrified but hugely entertained friend that the word I was looking for was actually scatterbrained and not scatological, which, for those of you who didn't know, basically means obsessed with shit. I stopped saying it at once and got the job I applied for next. So that's something.
After dating this girl that I really liked for about a month, she took me to her lake house for a nice, relaxing weekend with her extended family. Skipping to the chase, a day into the weekend, a poo storm was brewing and the forecast wasn't looking pretty. with no fan in the bathroom. Like, are you kidding me? No scented spray and paper thin walls. I had to be the ultimate ninja shitter. There was some shampoo in the shower, so I put a little in the toilet bowl so that the scent would rise when I initially flushed, cancelling the proof that I was even there. Genius, right? I eased out the first brown cow, silent as Anne Frank. Courtesy flush, smells like flowers. I was in the clear. After dropping a few smaller nuggets, I reached over to the TP, not even one square. A quick glance around, no Kleenex either. Okay, don't panic. Checked under the sink, nothing. Mini half closet, success. Haha. The gods were smiling down upon me, smirking and feeling like I had just dodged a bullet. I was in a generous mood. I decided to change the old TP stub on the spring-loaded rolling pin to a fresh roll. A true hero. Dislodging the Chinese finger handcuffs, the spring was more loaded than I expected, and it fired. Then, the unthinkable. Flying through the air, the TP holder projectile was heading for a 4x2 inch opening right between my legs, aka the opening between me and the toilet bowl. In my attempt to save it, I managed to throw the other half and the spring into the bowl for one big poo party. Quickly grabbing them out, the pieces were dripping shitty water all over the floor, over the bath mat, and I was in the middle of a potato sack race trying to get to the sink with my pants around my ankles. Doing the best I could, I washed the dirty off of them. I cleaned what I could. As I opened the bathroom door, her uncle was about to walk in. He's ex-Special Forces, a real scary man. As he walked past me, he sarcastically says, "I hope you got it all in the bowl, son. I'd hate for you to have to clean it off the walls." You don't even know, Uncle Rick. You don't even know.
A friend of my soon-to-be father-in-law is a bona fide lunatic. Some guys had played a practical joke on him a few months ago, and he'd been waiting to get revenge. They live on the central coast of New South Wales in Australia, so there is a lot of water that separates the towns, and people use boats a lot to get around. Some of the guys who pulled a practical joke on him called around to see him hang out. He'd recently bought a new place and told them to drive around and have a look. He said he'd be around shortly after, and they could have a few beers and chill out there. Just before they left, he said that his mother was there, but she was old and shit, and just to hang outside until they got there, and she wouldn't notice and might get a fright if they called the house. As soon as the guys drove off, he hopped into his boat and tore across the water to his place, as it was quicker than driving. He got to his place and threw on a dress, wig, some old boots, and grabbed his rifle. He hid in the house and waited for his friends to arrive. They arrive, and they are looking around the property, when he bursts out of the house screaming like an old woman. The guys are about to try and calm her down, when he cocks the rifle and starts letting shots out above their heads. They only realized it was him when they stopped screaming their heads off, long enough to realize that the mother had literally keeled over laughing, and they'd all pretty much shat their pants. Two of the guys had bolted and were gone. He said it took one of them about an hour to get over the fright. Needless to say, they never pulled a practical joke on him again. Another one. These guys used to work on a building site. Their boss was a really predictable and everyday like clockwork kind of fellow, and he would always go to the same portaloo and have a crap. They started hooking the seat up to a battery, so he started getting an electric shock when he sat down on the seat. He stopped going into the portaloo and used to go in this spot in some woods nearby. They stalked him for a few days and realized he always went to the exact same spot. So one day, they put some dirt and leaves on a spade and hid in a ditch behind him. Apparently it took a few days, but bingo! One of the days he did a shit directly into the spade, which they very quietly removed, so that there was nothing on the ground. Apparently the poor bastard came back to his staff white as a ghost, thinking he was losing his mind. He told them about the vanishing shit. They all had to fight back tears from laughter, and it turned out it freaked him out so much, he used to drive 10 minutes off-site to use the bathroom. He was that scared.
We all went out to the typical college bars one night and got trashed. We, being roommates, and some friends of ours. There were some people from out of town staying over at our place too that night. So after we all drank, everyone was drunk and fallen asleep in their respective areas. Roommates in their rooms, and guests on the couches and floors. The next morning, everyone is just up, playing video games and chatting. One of the guys visiting from out of town, we called him Leroy, walks into the room and interrupts everyone, but very quietly. Let me preface this by saying that Leroy is a very tall guy. He's one of those guys that everyone knows is very friendly, kind of a big friendly giant, you might say. Anyway, back to the story. He walks in and says very casually, guys, I think someone pooped in the shower. And this is when I stopped my Counter-Strike game with my roommates and I confusedly walked towards the restroom. I looked down into the shower and, lo and behold, there was a stinking pile of shit there. When I say a pile of shit, I mean a pile of shit. It's not like there's a few pieces of shit, like when you see a dog doing a poo in a park. I'm talking a pile of shit, as if someone slowly diarrheaed into the shower. Now, the first thing that logically crossed my mind was, check what's wrong with the toilet. I checked the toilet, I flushed it, and it all seemed fine. Why wouldn't someone shit in the toilet? How drunk must he or she have been? These were my thoughts. So I screamed, running out of the bathroom, because the smell was really hitting my brain. That shit was dank. I run out, and everyone, one by one, goes in to take a look at the shower shit extravaganza. Everyone comes out either laughing or gagging. Lots of, oh my gods, and holy shits. This is when we all go detective on this situation. We started deciphering who could have done this, considering nobody would admit to the crime. I take the role of lead detective and throw out some conjecture. Firstly, there are 2 bathrooms and 3 roommates who live there. 2 people share a shower shit bathroom and 1 person has his own. I come to the conclusion that it is unlikely to be the person who lives in his own room, considering that he has his own bathroom. Why would he shit like that in someone else's? Secondly, I live in one of the other rooms, and I know I didn't do it. Thirdly, why would one of the guests shit in the shower? That's just plain impolite. So we narrowed it down to the last piece of shit. Pun intended, roommate. We call him John. John keeps denying it. We all accuse him and start laughing too. It basically turned into a witch hunt, where we were all accused and he continued to fend it off. But John couldn't keep it up any longer. He doesn't admit it, but he might as well have. He says, fine, I'll clean it up. I didn't do it, but I will. This is when I yelled out, bullshit! Why would you clean up if you didn't do it? Everyone's bursting out laughing, taking pictures of the shit before it gets cleaned up. This one would go down in history. I realised he was probably kind of embarrassed, and I was probably being a little bit of a douche about it. But still, that's what you get when you shit in a shower, when there's a toilet right next to you.
It all started as a normal day. My wife and I were in Old Venice going to our usual pizza place. It was the only place we found where we could get a good meal for under €10 in that very expensive city. I had a pizza rustic. It was delicious. It had onions, gorgonzola and mozzarella, tomato, hot salami. Delicious. I had been feeling a little feverish and overall not quite well the past day or so. And towards the end of the meal, I realized, damn, I need to go. It came on thick and fast. I needed to go. Then before I knew it, I was using all my willpower to prevent myself from shitting my pants. Of course it's Europe, so there are no public bathrooms. The guy in the pizza place recommended the train station, which is about a 5-minute run from the pizza place. I thought I might be able to make it. Maybe, if I ran through the crowded streets and over bridges. As I took my first few hurried steps out of the pizza place, I realized running was not an option. But then I saw another cafe, a bigger one that I had never been into, and thought, they probably have a bathroom. And I was right. Thankfully, the lone stall was unoccupied. I rushed in and made certain the door was latched, even though I could barely hold it. Then I saw it. The crazy, weird Italian toilet. I'd never seen anything like it before. It was huge, twice the size of a normal toilet, and it had no seat. It was covered in pee. Disgusting. But there was nothing to be done. I had to unleash the volcano. Now, I have to try and describe this poo. It was truly extraordinary. You know how normally sick to the stomach diarrhea comes out in squirts? This wasn't like that. It was just one big boom, like a powerful cannon. I never heard, smelt, or saw anything like it before. It wasn't even overly watery. It was the consistency of arse ketchup, and it smelled like rotten eggs and meat. Boom! I shot it so hard that despite squatting only a few inches from the toilet, my butt ketchup flew all over and completely covered the back of the toilet bowl and reservoir, and even splattered onto the wall. That was it. Just one explosion. No more after. A true arse volcano. I thought it couldn't get any worse, but oh, did it ever. I saw what I had done and thought, holy shit, I have to clean that up. That's nasty. First things first, I had to wipe. And guess what? There was no toilet paper. None. At this point, I realized that there were people waiting. Uh-oh. This was such a messy thing that going unwiped, even temporarily, was not an option. But my one saving grace was that this bizarre bathroom had a sink in the stall. An unusually wide low sink. So I scooted up and washed all the Vesuvian poo remnants away. A wet, clean arse is better than a shat-covered one. When I tried to flush the toilet, to at least get some of the mess cleaned up, of course it didn't flush. It wasn't clogged, just broken. Maybe it was the urinal. There was no water in it. Oops. My poo even hit the flusher, which must have been 3 feet up and back from ground zero. By the way, with no toilet paper, there was no way to clean up my toxic waste. My masterpiece reeked and looked like hell, so I wasn't looking forward to opening the door. When I did, I found 3 dudes waiting for the stall, and I had no choice but to shamefully inform them that it was a biohazard zone. So as I walked past them, I used the international sign language for, "Oh shit, that shit smells bad," which is holding one's nose and waving a hand in front of it. This was so embarrassing and surreal. I still had unacceptable amounts of poop residue and smell on my hands because the stall's sink had no soap. Even though I wanted to run away, I had to get soap from another sink outside the stall. But that sink had no water. What the hell, Italy? And at this point, the guys were starting to look at my artwork and gasping in horror, swearing in Italian, as they ran away while still swearing up a storm. It was a truly magnificent and horrific sight. The one guy who hadn't seen the store yet was watching me, trying to get water out of the other sink, and then finally realized it was his turn and started to walk in. He saw what was going on in there and turned right around. He didn't swear, he just looked freaked out and noped out of there really fast. Thankfully, this left me alone to go back and wash my hands properly. I wanted to clean up the mess more, but I was worried more people would come in and wait while I was in the stall, and I'd have to receive more shameful looks. I got the hell out of that cafe as fast as I could. That was possibly the most embarrassed I've ever been. Having those poor guys see that explosion and then look at me on their way out while swearing in a state of sheer disgust. That will stick with me. I feel sorry for the person who had to clean it. Maybe they just burnt the whole stool to the ground.
I'm then 22 years old, working for a construction company. We had a job out of state, so we were staying in a hotel for a few days. Okay, so one night, the guy I was sharing a room with and myself got a couple of bottles of Captain Morgan and got pretty lit. We played some video games and cards and watched TV, eventually both passing out super drunk, blackout style. When I woke up in the morning, I get up and I realise I'm naked. I don't think much of it. I sleep naked at home occasionally, so I was just like, whatever, and got some clothes on. I get ready, feeling like a bag of shit, and make my way downstairs to the breakfast room and start eating some cereal and talking to my roommate about the night. He didn't remember much, other than he outlasted me a little bit and then passed out too. I started remembering a dream I had about being lost in some castle and trying to find the bathroom to take a huge shit, and expressed to my buddy that I had a messed up dream last night. Anyway, we get to the job site around lunchtime. My buddy comes into the building laughing and crying and yelling my name. At this point, I'm laughing too, just because he's laughing so hard. He then tells me the hotel just called, and that they were not very happy about the prank we pulled, and that they had blocked our keys, and we would have to come to the front desk when we got back to explain ourselves before they would let us back in the room. He asked why. They responded with, well, there's a huge pile of shit next to one of the beds. He asked, poop? Yes, poop. What do you know about it? He replies. Well, my roommate isn't known for it, but I'll ask him. At this point, I'm on my knees, dying, laughing so hard. My boss too is hearing this, and he is pissed, but can't help but cry from laughter too. My dream is starting to make sense at this point, but instead of there being a big castle, it's a hotel room. At the end of the day, After seriously laughing the entire rest of that day, we headed back to the hotel, nervous and hysterically laughing. We walked into the lobby. The guy at the front desk is cracking up too when we walk up. We make up a bullshit story about how the door doesn't shut properly and someone must have walked in and took a dump on our floor after we left. I don't know if he bought it, but he activated our keys and said, "Good luck." We didn't really pay attention to what he was saying. We were just glad that we didn't get kicked out. So, as we walk into the room, laughing like hell, we instantly get hit by a wall of shit. Like I could taste it, it was on my tongue. They left the shit in the corner of the room for the whole day. I fell to the bed, covered my face with embarrassment and still laughing. I look up and my buddy is picking it up and throwing it in the toilet and says, "I have kids. I do this all the time." I still get shit for this, even today, and it's been 7 years.
My friend and his parents and I all went out to eat for his dad's birthday a few months ago. And me and my friend finished our food early. So his mum gave us $10 and a milk coupon to run to Major to pick up a shower mirror and a gallon of milk. This Major was unfamiliar to us, so we ended up wandering for a while to try and find our stuff, and my friend tells me he has to shit. So he ran off to find the bathroom while I finished looking for the stuff we needed. 10 minutes had passed, and I was standing near the self-checkout, waiting for him to show up, when finally he walks up from behind me, and I noticed he seemed a bit nervous. First thing he says is, "Hey, so we're bros, right?" I responded, "Yeah, I guess so. Why?" He looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "I shit myself, dude." At first I thought it was a joke, but then he pulled from his hand, his pocket, revealing a shit-covered $10 bill, the coupon, and palm. Dude, I couldn't find the bathroom, and it just slipped out. When I asked what he did with the shit, he looked around to make sure nobody else was listening and said, "I threw it on the shelf and ran." This was the icing on the cake. To my hysterical laughter, dead center in Major. He left to go clean up, while I delicately handled the non-shit covered side of the money, and we left to find his parents waiting outside, pretty pissed that we were so late. When we came up short on change, his mum asked why we didn't use the coupon. He pulled it out of his pocket and said, "I don't really know how to tell you this, but..." But before he could finish, she interrupted with an angry, "You lost it, didn't you? This is why I can't trust you to do things for me." He slid the shit-slathered coupon back into his pocket and muttered, "Yeah, I lost it." With relief, I couldn't contain my giggling the whole way home. He was actually terrified he'd end up on the news or something.
The year is 2002. I'm 20 years old and a student at Southampton University, living in Freshers' Halls, a flat of 10 guys, one of whom, Chris, has a car and keeps on campus for getting home and weekly supermarket runs for the flat. So we all chip in a few quid to help cover the parking cost each term. There's a block of flats next to the student halls for young professional types. A guy in there has a nice convertible Mercedes, but there's not much parking for the flat. So he often steals our parking spot in our student parking area. We tried reporting him to the hall manager, but nothing was done. This goes on for about 2 terms. For at least 2 or 3 weeks we had to park somewhere else because this tosser was stealing our student places. Chris gets a parking ticket because we parked in a restricted area due to there not being enough space in the student parking lot. Chris gets a parking ticket because we parked in a restricted area due to there not being enough space in the student car park. We left a note on the guy's car. Asking him to pay the ticket as he stole our spot. We find the note the next day, thrown on the floor with "Eat shit and fuck off" written on it. We go out drinking at night, discussing our neighbour and how much of an arsehole he is. Inventive, but ultimately stupid ways of getting revenge are discussed. Until we're too drunk and forget. On the way home we find him, parked in the student parking again. Full of drunken, 20-year-old bravado, I declare enough is enough. I climbed up onto the bonnet of his car. I squatted and leaved him a steaming pile of shit on top of his shiny Mercedes badge. We leave the scene, and I'm praised as the phantom shitter. How did I fuck up? Well, turns out I wasn't quite a phantom, and was in fact seen by him. Turns out he was also dating one of my lecturers, who recognised me from his description, and then contacted the hall manager. I received a bill for a full wash and a valet of his car.